I always found it amusing how the biggest betrayals in life don't come with dramatic music or ominous warnings. No, they sneak up on you in the most mundane moments, like when you're fixing a leaking faucet in your own home, completely oblivious that you're the only one actually keeping things together. That was me. Wrench in one hand, phone in the other, about to text my wife when a single notification from her screen, left unlocked on the counter, cracked my world open. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was unforgettable. Simple words, but their weight crushed something inside me. I didn't panic. I didn't rage. I didn't even feel anything right away, except for the dull amusement that I was standing there, tightening a pipe while my wife was out somewhere loosening her morals. I stared at the message for a long moment, taking in every detail. The sender's name was just a placeholder, a disguise. Amateur move. But I wasn't dealing with a mastermind. I was dealing with someone who thought they were smart enough to get away with betraying me. That was her first mistake. The second was underestimating what I would do next. I placed her phone back exactly as it was and finished fixing the sink. Why? Because nothing in my behavior could change. Not yet. I needed information. Needed to know exactly what I was dealing with before I made my move. Emotion is a liability in war, and make no mistake, this was war now. I wasn't just some betrayed husband. I was the executioner sharpening his axe. That night, when she came home, I watched her with new eyes. She kissed me on the cheek, smiled, and went on about her day as if nothing had happened. It was almost impressive, the level of deceit she could pull off with such ease. But now, I saw the subtle hesitations, the way she glanced at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, the barely noticeable delay before answering simple questions. Lies are never in the big things. They exist in the smallest cracks. And now that I knew what to look for, I saw them everywhere. I didn't confront her. Confrontation is for fools. It gives the guilty a chance to lie, to twist, to control the narrative. No, I let her think she was safe, that she was in control. Meanwhile, I did what I do best, I planned. Step 1 was identifying A. I had suspicions, but suspicions weren't enough. I needed proof. So I did something my wife had apparently stopped doing. I paid attention. I noted when she seemed most eager to check her phone, when she made excuses to leave the house. And then I did something even simpler. I followed her. No grand espionage, no disguises. Just quiet observation. She made it easy. People who think they're getting away with something tend to get sloppy. 2 nights later, she told me she was meeting her friend Lisa for dinner. Except Lisa, bless her oblivious heart, had posted a picture of herself on a weekend getaway, 2 states over. That was all I needed. I waited 10 minutes after my wife left, then took my own car and followed at a distance. She didn't even check if she was being tailed. Arrogance is a beautiful flaw. She led me straight to him. Some upscale bar, dim lighting, intimate booths, cliché. The man she met? Even more so. Mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of face that screams, I buy affection because I can't earn it. I stayed long enough to confirm what I needed. Her body language, his touch on her hand, the way they leaned in too close for it to be anything but what it was. Now I had a face. But that wasn't enough. I needed to know him. Who he was. What he had to lose. A quick license plate check gave me his name. And when I had his name, I had everything. Social media. Work. Family. The whole carefully curated life of a man who thought he was untouchable. I spent the next few days learning every detail about him. The job he held so dear, the wife he was still legally married to, the business connections that couldn't afford scandal. He was living in a glass house, and I was about to throw a rock straight through it. And my wife? She had no idea. She still came home every night, kissed me, laughed, told me she loved me. It was almost cute how deeply she believed in her own deception. But I had already started the clock. She just didn't hear it ticking. The beauty of revenge isn't in the act itself, it's in the build-up. The slow realization. The unraveling. The moment they go from feeling invincible to realizing they were never in control at all. That moment was coming, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. Looking back, I almost have to laugh at how perfect everything seemed. The kind of life people post about online. Smiling pictures, romantic anniversaries, lazy Sundays spent tangled up on the couch. A life so steady, so normal, that I never once thought to question it. That was my mistake, wasn't it? Believing in the comfort, in the predictability, in the idea that love, once established, was something permanent. I had built a fortress in my mind, convinced that our marriage was unshakable. And maybe it had been, once. Maybe in the early years, when we couldn't keep our hands off each other, when conversations stretched late into the night, when even the dullest of routines felt like something special just because we were in them together. We had been that couple. The ones who laughed too loudly at inside jokes no one else understood. The ones who held hands absent-mindedly in grocery stores, who stole kisses in the middle of making dinner, who made every small moment feel like it meant something. I thought we had settled into something lasting, something unbreakable. But I see it now, how slowly, over time, the cracks had begun to form. How the routine that once felt like stability had turned into something predictable. Mornings had always been our time. She loved coffee in bed, always with a touch of cinnamon, always before getting up. I made it for her every day without fail, even when I was running late. She'd smile, groggy but grateful, and say, "You always take care of me." It had been a ritual, a small act of love. And then, at some point, she stopped commenting on it. Just took the cup without looking up from her phone. I barely noticed at the time, just filed it away under the natural shifts of a long marriage. Another sign I had ignored. Our evenings had once been full of conversation plans, dreams, reflections on the day. And then, somewhere along the way, they became quieter. Not in an unhappy way, not in a way that signaled alarm, but in a way that felt settled. Comfortable silence. That's what I told myself it was. We still had dinner together, still watched our favorite shows, still shared the same bed. That meant we were fine, didn't it? I remember the first time she hesitated before kissing me goodbye. It was small, barely noticeable. A slight pause, a shift in her weight, a hesitation that lasted no more than a second before she leaned in and did it anyway. But once you start seeing things in retrospect, you realize how glaringly obvious they were. The business trips started getting more frequent. At first, I thought nothing of them. Her company was expanding, and she had always been ambitious. I had admired that about her, how driven she was, how determined to carve out her own success. So when she told me she had to travel more, I encouraged it. Go show them why you're the best, I'd say, meaning every word. She'd smile, kiss me, and promise to call. And she did. Every night, without fail. Except the calls got shorter. Less personal. More tired excuses about being busy. I chalked it up to stress. She was working hard. I didn't want to add to that. The late nights followed. She'd come home later and later, sometimes long after I had gone to bed. I'd wake up to the sound of her moving around in the dark, the soft rustling of clothes being discarded, the faint scent of unfamiliar cologne lingering just a little too long. But what did I do? Nothing. I rolled over, mumbled something about her getting some rest, and went back to sleep. Because trust, real trust, meant not jumping to conclusions, right? There were moments, brief ones, where my gut had whispered something was off. A flicker of something in her eyes when I asked about her day. A too casual mention of a coworker I had never heard of before. A sudden interest in fitness, in new lingerie, in subtle changes to her appearance that she never commented on. But I had brushed them aside. Because that's what love does. It makes you rationalize. It makes you ignore the signs because the alternative is too painful to consider. The last vacation we took together had been perfect, or so I thought. A secluded beach, warm sun, cocktails in hand. She had looked at me, really looked at me, with something close to affection. "I love our life," she had said, leaning her head against my shoulder. And I had believed her. But now I wonder, had she been trying to convince herself? Or had she already decided that this was temporary, that she was just waiting for the moment when she could slip away without causing too much damage? Had she felt guilty then? Or had she already justified it in her mind, convinced herself that she deserved something more, something different? I had spent years thinking we were unshakable. That love was enough. That loyalty was something you built brick by brick until nothing could tear it down. But love isn't what keeps people faithful. It's choice. And somewhere along the way, she had made hers. And me? I had spent all this time loving someone who had already started slipping away. But that was the past. And I wasn't a man who lived in the past. I was a man who planned for the future. And now, my future was going to be built on something new, something far more satisfying than trust. It was a Tuesday. Nothing special about it. Nothing that should have set it apart from any other day in our predictable little world. But I remember it now because it was the first moment I felt it, that subtle, nagging itch in the back of my mind. The first real sign that something wasn't right. And once you see the first crack, you start looking for more. She had been in the kitchen, phone in hand, scrolling with a distracted half-smile. I was at the table, sipping my coffee, flipping through emails. Just another morning. But then her phone lit up with a call, and that's when I saw it. The name on the screen. Work. Not a person. Just work. A generic label, deliberately vague. And yet, when she picked up, her entire demeanor changed. She turned slightly away from me, pressing the phone to her ear, her voice suddenly softer, more careful. "Hey," she said. Just that, hey, but there was something in the way she said it. Something that made my gut tighten. I didn't react. I just sat there, stirring my coffee, listening. I couldn't hear the other voice, but I could hear her. The way she laughed lightly, the way she said, "No, not now," in a playful tone, like she was setting a boundary but enjoying the attention. Then, a pause. A quick glance in my direction before she stepped out onto the back porch, closing the door behind her. That was new. She never took work calls outside. Never had a reason to. I sat there, staring at the closed door, every instinct in me suddenly alert. My mind started running through the possibilities. Could it have been just work? Sure. Maybe some harmless office banter. Maybe a client. Maybe something completely innocent. But something about it felt wrong. It wasn't the call itself, it was her reaction to it. The shift in posture, the drop in her voice, the way she put a physical barrier between us the moment she answered. I could have let it go. Could have brushed it off. But that would have made me a fool. And I wasn't a fool. So I waited. Not for her to come back in. No, I wanted to see her after. The aftermath of the call would tell me more than the call itself. When she finally stepped back inside, she did what she always did when she knew she had something to hide. She overcompensated. Smiling a little too brightly, kissing me on the cheek like she was just a loving wife on an ordinary day. "You have plans after work?" she asked casually, pouring herself another cup of coffee. There it was. A deflection wrapped in casual conversation. She wanted to steer the attention back to me, to make sure I wasn't thinking too much about whatever that call had been. I decided to test something. "Nah," I said, watching her reaction carefully. "Might just come home early, relax." A flicker. A half-second hesitation before she turned to put the coffee pot back, her face out of view. "That sounds nice," she said, voice even controlled. But her fingers gripped the handle a little too tightly before she set it down. Now I was watching. Now I was paying attention. I started noticing other things. Small things. The way she started checking her phone more often but keeping it face down on the counter. The way she lingered in the bathroom just a little longer than usual after coming home late. The way she'd suddenly seem preoccupied at night, lost in thought, like she was replaying something in her mind. But the thing about people hiding something? They don't realize how much they reveal in trying to conceal. A few nights later, I walked into the bedroom to find her sitting up in bed, phone in hand, a faint glow illuminating her face. She didn't hear me at first, too absorbed in whatever she was looking at. But when she finally noticed me, she jolted slightly, just a fraction, just enough to tell me she hadn't expected me to be there. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Yeah," she said too quickly, locking her phone and setting it aside. "Just checking emails." Emails. At 11 at night. In bed. She rolled over, kissed me goodnight like nothing was wrong. Like she wasn't keeping something just out of my reach. I didn't press. Not yet. But now, the game had begun. The thing about suspicion is that once it's there, it doesn't go away. It sits in the back of your mind, poking, whispering, urging you to look closer. And I wasn't the type of man to ignore a whisper like that. People think betrayal is loud, dramatic, full of screaming and accusations, but the truth is it's quiet at first. It's in the small shifts in routine, the pauses before answering, the too casual way someone explains where they've been. It's in the little things that don't add up. And once you start seeing them, you can't unsee them. I had already decided I wasn't going to be a fool, wasn't going to let myself be blindsided by whatever game she was playing, so I started playing my own. I didn't confront, I observed, I didn't accuse, I tested, I didn't get emotional, I got smart. The first thing I did was check her phone. I waited until she was in the shower, left it charging on the nightstand like she always did, except this time, when I picked it up, the lock screen didn't budge, fingerprint denied, passcode changed. She had never done that before. We had always had open access to each other's devices, not because we checked them, but because there was never a reason to hide anything until now. Fine, I thought you want to keep secrets, so will I. The next thing was location tracking. We had shared it for years, mostly out of convenience when running errands or meeting up. Now, when I checked, she had turned it off, not disabled it, just switched it, so that I could no longer see where she was going. Interesting, very interesting. I started keeping track, mentally cataloging every inconsistency, every lie wrapped in casual conversation. She said she was working late last Thursday, but I had driven by her office on the way home, lights off, parking lot empty. She said she was grabbing drinks with Lisa, but when I casually mentioned it later to Lisa's husband, he frowned and said, "Oh, weird." She told me she was home that night. The beauty of deception is that people think they're being smart, but lying takes effort, it takes memory, and eventually cracks start forming because one lie has to be covered by another and another until eventually the whole structure collapses under its own weight. I became methodical, asking innocent questions at different times, watching if the answers stayed consistent. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. Once I asked how her dinner was with coworkers, she told me about the restaurant, about what she ate, about a funny thing that happened with a waiter. It all sounded real until 2 days later I asked again offhandedly, and she hesitated just a second too long before repeating the same story almost word for word, no natural variation, like she had rehearsed it. I smiled, nodded, acted like I bought it, but inside I knew I had her. Then there was her car. Normally she kept it clean, but now there were faint traces of someone else's presence, a smell that wasn't hers, a faint mix of cologne and unfamiliar perfume, too subtle for her to notice, too obvious for me to ignore. Once I found a strand of long blonde hair in the passenger seat, except my wife has dark hair. I didn't say a word, I just pocketed it. Every night when she fell asleep, I would wait, watch, listen, her breathing slow, her body relax, then I'd slip out of bed and check small things, the trash, her work bag, the history on her laptop. She had started using private browsing mode recently, another new habit. She was getting sloppy, arrogant, thinking I hadn't noticed, thinking she was still ahead in the game. That was her mistake. I started laying small traps, asking things I already knew the answer to see how she'd respond, casual throwaway questions to see if she'd lie. She did every time, without hesitation, and every time she did I felt less and less like a husband and more like a hunter closing in on his prey. I wasn't just looking for proof anymore, I was building something bigger, something she wouldn't see coming, something that would make sure when I struck she wouldn't get back up. It happened on a Sunday, the kind of day meant for slow mornings and lazy afternoons, a day that should have been normal but wasn't, because by then normal was an illusion, a cheap trick played by someone who thought they were smarter than me. She had left early, saying she was meeting a friend for brunch, something light, something casual. She kissed me on the cheek, told me not to wait up because they might go shopping after. I smiled, nodded, told her to have fun, and the moment she walked out the door I knew she was lying. I didn't follow her, not at first, no. I wanted to see if she'd trip over her own story, so I waited an hour, then sent Lisa a quick text, casual, harmless, hey, hope you and my wife are having a great time, tell her to bring me back something nice, winking emoji, no reply, not at first, but then 10 minutes later a text back, hey, actually I haven't seen her in weeks, everything okay? I stared at the screen, not even surprised anymore, just disappointed that she thought she could play this game and win. I didn't respond, didn't need to, because by then I was already grabbing my keys, stepping outside with one goal, find her, catch her in the act, make sure there was no room for doubt. I had gotten good at following her without being seen. Knew the places she went, knew the patterns of her little lies, and today was no different. She wasn't at brunch, wasn't shopping, she was across town, parked in a discreet little spot behind a boutique hotel, nothing fancy, just one of those places designed for people who don't want to be seen, people who have something to hide. I stayed in my car watching, waiting, didn't have to wait long. 10 minutes later, she appeared, stepping out of the hotel door, hair slightly messy, clothes too perfectly adjusted, like she had taken an extra second in the mirror to make sure there were no traces of whatever she'd just done. And then he followed him, the man I had already suspected, expensive suit, polished shoes, the kind of man who doesn't love women, just collects them like trophies. They didn't kiss, not here, not in the open, but they didn't have to. The way she looked at him, the way he smirked at her, like she was just another conquest, like I was nothing more than an obstacle in his little game, it told me everything I needed to know. I could have confronted them, could have walked right up and shattered her perfect little lie, but that would have been too easy, too predictable, and I wasn't here for theatrics, I was here for proof. So I stayed, pulled out my phone, snapped a few photos, then watched as they got into separate cars, leaving no evidence except the one thing they hadn't accounted for: me. Driving home, I felt it, not sadness, not grief, something colder, something sharper, the kind of rage that doesn't explode, but simmers, waiting, calculating. I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the photos, zooming in on the little details, her hand on his arm, his smirk, the way they moved in sync, like this wasn't new, like this was routine. She came home an hour later, smiling like nothing had happened, shopping bags in hand, dropping them on the counter, stretching like she was exhausted from a long day of laughs and stories. I watched her, watched the way she moved so effortlessly through the lie, then casually asked, so how was brunch? She didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, just launched into some story about Lisa, about mimosas, about a funny waiter. And that's when I knew that whatever love had existed between us was dead, not because of the cheating, not because of the betrayal, but because she could stand in front of me, look me in the eye, and lie without a second thought. She didn't see it yet, didn't know that I had already decided that her game was over, but I wasn't going to let her know, not yet, because revenge isn't about reacting, it's about patience, about setting the board, so that when the final move comes there's only one outcome: total destruction. Revenge is not about anger or impulse, it is about patience, about strategy, about finding the exact place where they are weakest and pressing until they break. I sat in the quiet of our home, the home she had turned into a stage for deception, and I thought about every way I could dismantle her life. I could expose her, instantly drop the photos in our family group chat, let the shame swallow her whole, but no, that was too crude, too fast. I wanted something deeper, something that would unravel her piece by piece. The key was her lover, the man who smirked at her like she was just another expensive indulgence. He thought he was untouchable and she thought he was a prize, but people like him always have something to lose. They don't cheat because they love excitement, they cheat because they are balancing on a thin thread between power and ruin, and all it takes is the right push. So I started digging. I already had his name, his job, his connections. A man like him always has skeletons. I just needed to shake the right closet. First, I learned that he was still legally married, his wife conveniently tucked away in another city, estranged, but not divorced, a woman who had no idea he was parading around with mine. I found her social media, simple, quiet, a woman who had once believed in love and had been left behind just like me. I drafted a message, polite, respectful, attached the photos I had taken, nothing cruel, just the truth wrapped in cold, undeniable proof. I hesitated only for a second before hitting send because she deserved to know just as much as I deserved my revenge. And then I waited and watched as the first thread began to unravel. The response was immediate. Her message back was short but furious. She had been fighting for a divorce, fighting for financial security, while he had been out treating my wife to hotel rooms and expensive dinners. She thanked me not just for the proof, but for the leverage, because now she had exactly what she needed to burn his little empire down, and I knew from that moment he was about to be a very busy man. But that was only part one. Part two was making sure my wife felt the ground shifting beneath her before she even knew there was a game being played. I became the perfect husband again, attentive, kind, affectionate. I asked about her day, listened to her stories, pretended to be oblivious. It made her comfortable, made her tea in case she was still in control, and then I did what she would never expect. I suggested we have a joint dinner with her lover. The look on her face was worth every second of the restraint I had been holding. She laughed at first, then hesitated, then asked why I suddenly wanted to meet him, and I just smiled, told her I had been too distant, told her I wanted to be more involved in her life, told her that if this man was such a big part of her work, then I should at least know him. Her hands gripped the coffee cup a little too tightly before she nodded and said she would set it up. And that is how I ended up sitting across from them in a high-end restaurant, watching them both squirm. He recognized me the moment I walked in. Of course he did, because his wife had already torn through his world by then. Lawyers had been called, assets frozen. Suddenly he wasn't the untouchable man anymore. He was vulnerable, exposed, and here I was shaking his hand like we were old friends. My wife had no idea what was happening, not yet. She was too busy playing the role of a composed woman, balancing two worlds, unaware that both were crumbling. The dinner was simple, casual, but every word I spoke was carefully placed, designed to make him sweat, to make her shift in her seat, to make them both realize that something was very, very wrong. And then at the perfect moment, I leaned back, looked him in the eye, and said, I hear your wife is lovely. He went pale. My wife stiffened. The silence stretched just long enough before I smiled, reached for my drink, and took a slow, deliberate sip. The night ended shortly after, my wife rushing us out, making excuses. My lover is feeling unwell, she said. I think we should go, she said, and I just nodded, still smiling, because I had already won. She just didn't know it yet, but she would soon, because this was only the beginning of her unraveling. There is an art to dismantling a lie. It has to be slow, methodical, precise. If you strike too early, they wriggle out. If you strike too late, they've already escaped. But if you time it just right, you get to watch them crumble in real time. And that was exactly what I wanted. I didn't just want her to feel guilty. Guilt was too fleeting, too easy. I wanted her to feel trapped, to feel the walls closing in until she had no way out, no air left to breathe. The dinner was just the first cut, a warning shot that made her uneasy, made her start to suspect that something wasn't right, and that was exactly what I needed. I needed her off-balance, paranoid, questioning herself. While I tightened the noose, she started texting more that night, disappearing into the bathroom, phone pressed to her ear, whispering urgent words. I didn't have to hear them to know what they were. She was trying to control the damage, but the thing about controlling damage is that you have to know where the hit is coming from, and she had no idea. The next morning, I kissed her on the forehead, told her I was heading to the gym, but instead I went to work on the final stage of my plan. She had always cared about appearances, about how others saw her. She crafted an image of perfection, a successful career, a devoted husband, a flawless life, and that was her weakness, because nothing shakes a person more than having the image they built shatter in front of an audience. I started with her job. Her company had a strict ethics policy. Relationships with clients were frowned upon. Relationships that included luxury hotel stays and dinners on the company card were fireable offenses, so I compiled everything. I had receipts, Timestamps even an invoice from the hotel that I retrieved from her email because in her arrogance she had left it linked to our shared desktop. She thought she had been covering her tracks, but she had only been hiding them in plain sight. Then there were our friends, the ones she lied to every time she said she was with them, every time she used them as a cover for her little disappearances. I started making quiet conversations with each of them, subtle drops of information. Did you hear about what happened at dinner? Strange how she never mentioned that man before. Did you know she told me she was with you last Friday? Funny, because you were out of town. I wasn't accusing, I was just planting seeds, and seeds grow fast when they're watered with doubt. But the masterpiece, the real checkmate, was our anniversary. She had probably forgotten it was coming up, too busy sneaking around to notice the date, but I hadn't. I made sure everyone knew about the celebration weeks in advance, made sure the guest list was full. Friends, family, colleagues, even her boss. A perfect gathering, a perfect setup. And when the night arrived, I made sure she was the star of the show. She walked in expecting a romantic evening, a reaffirmation of our perfect life. She dressed for it, played the role perfectly, greeting guests, laughing, sipping wine, completely unaware that the entire foundation beneath her feet was seconds from collapsing. I waited until the dinner was served, until glasses were raised and conversations warm and easy. I stood up, took my glass in hand, smiled at her like the loving husband I had once been, and said, I want to take a moment to celebrate my beautiful wife. Her eyes softened. She thought she had one thought, that whatever suspicion she had felt after the dinner with her lover had passed. But then I turned to the screen, the projector I had set up earlier with a slideshow meant to show the highlights of our life together. Except these weren't vacation photos, these weren't happy memories, these were timestamps, location data, credit card charges, screenshots of messages deleted from her phone but not from the cloud. There was no dramatic music, no shouting, just silence, thick, heavy, suffocating. She turned pale, her hands trembled. She tried to stand, but there was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs turned to gasps, faces turned towards her. Her boss straightened his tie, her friends exchanged looks. The perfect image she had built so carefully collapsed in a single moment. I let the silence stretch, let her feel every second of it. Then I raised my glass, took a sip, and said, Happy anniversary, darling, and walked away, leaving her standing there drowning in the wreckage of her own making. She thought she had everything under control. She thought she was playing the perfect game, balancing the lies, keeping her secrets wrapped neatly in her little world. But she had no idea that I had been the one holding the strings all along, setting her up piece by piece until there was nowhere left for her to run, nowhere left to hide. Everything was in place, and she didn't even see it coming. Our anniversary was the perfect setting. She believed it would be a night about us, a celebration of our love, a gathering of family, friends, colleagues, everyone important in her life. She dressed for the occasion, a stunning black dress, hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. She walked into the venue with the confidence of a woman who still believed she was in control, who still believed that she had fooled everyone, including me. I played my part perfectly, greeted her with a warm smile, kissed her cheek, held her hand. As we made our way through the room, she was radiant, laughing, drinking, completely unaware that this was her final act, that by the end of the night she would be exposed, stripped of the lies she had built around herself. Dinner was served, drinks flowed, the atmosphere was warm, lively, exactly what she expected. And then as the plates were cleared and glasses refilled, I stood up, tapping my glass for attention. She turned to me, eyes soft, expecting the speech of a devoted husband ready to declare his undying love in front of everyone. And that was exactly what I did. At first I spoke about our years together, the memories we had built, the love I had once believed was unbreakable. I saw the flicker of guilt in her eyes. She must have felt safe, convinced that whatever suspicions I might have had were gone, that I was standing here declaring my love for her despite everything she had done. And then the room darkened just for a moment as the projector screen lit up behind me. The first image appeared, at first glance harmless, just a timestamp, a location, but then another, a hotel charge under her name, another, a credit card statement for an expensive dinner for two, and then the real ones, messages, screenshots, photos, all leading to one undeniable truth. Gasps filled the room, murmurs rippled through the crowd. My wife sat frozen, her face draining of color, her hands gripping the table as if she could physically hold herself together, her lover's name on the screen, proof of their deception flashing in front of everyone. The room was silent, eyes darting between her and me, between the screen and the reality unfolding in front of them. She turned to me, mouth opening, but no words came out. What could she say? What excuse could possibly fix this? I had left no room for denial, no space for escape. Her boss was there, her colleagues, the people who had respected her, trusted her, and now they saw her for what she truly was, a fraud, a liar, a woman who had used company funds to fund her affair. The whispers started spreading fast, too fast for her to control. And then the final nail in the coffin, her lover's wife walked in, perfectly timed. She had received the invitation just as I had planned. She had come prepared with her own set of evidence, of fury in her eyes that matched the quiet satisfaction in mine. She didn't say Anything at first, just walked up to my wife, stared at her for a long moment, then tossed a stack of papers onto the table. Financial documents, divorce filings. Her lover was about to lose everything, and so was my wife. She stood up abruptly, chair scraping against the floor, looking around, desperate for support, for someone to defend her, but no one did. Even her closest friends sat in stunned silence, some shaking their heads, others looking away, embarrassed to have ever called her a friend. Her parents sat rigid, ashamed, unable to meet her gaze. She turned to me finally, eyes wide, pleading, but there was nothing left to say. I just tilted my head, studied her like she was nothing more than a stranger, and then I picked up my glass, raised it in a final toast to my soon-to-be ex-wife, and walked away, leaving her to drown in the wreckage of her own making. She sat there frozen, her breath shallow, her hands trembling, as if she could physically hold the moment together, as if sheer willpower could erase the reality crashing down around her. But reality doesn't bend for liars, and now there was nothing left for her to hide behind. No carefully crafted words, no rehearsed excuses, just raw, undeniable exposure. She opened her mouth once, twice, but no words came out, because what could she possibly say? The murmurs in the room were getting louder, her colleagues whispering among themselves, her boss straightening his tie, looking from the projector screen to her with an expression that was shifting from confusion to disappointment to something colder and sharper. Her parents sat motionless, her father's jaw clenched tight, her mother's eyes brimming with tears, but not for her, no, for the shame she had just brought upon them. And then her lover's wife stepped forward, a slow, deliberate movement, a stack of documents still in her hands, and when she spoke, her voice was calm, too calm, like a storm just before it tears everything apart. You thought you were untouchable, didn't you? She said, addressing my wife directly, ignoring the stammered attempts at explanation. You thought you could play your little game and walk away clean. She dropped the documents onto the table in front of her, divorce filings, financial statements, accounts that were about to be frozen. You took everything from me, but I promise you I will take more back. My wife's lips parted. She shook her head. No, you don't understand. This isn't what it looks like. She turned to me, desperation in her eyes, as if I would be the one to save her, as if she hadn't already torn everything apart. But I just looked at her, calmly, tilted my head, and waited for her to keep digging her own grave. What was she going to do? Deny the photos, the messages, the receipts, deny that she had been caught walking out of a hotel with another man? Her hands clutched the edge of the table as if grounding herself. I made a mistake, she finally choked out, her voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't thinking straight. I felt disconnected from us. She swallowed hard. She was breaking. I can see it in the way her breathing was uneven, in the way her fingers clenched in helpless little fists. But I never meant to hurt you. I almost laughed, almost, because it was absurd, the sheer audacity to act like this was a slip, like infidelity was something that just happened, like a car accident on a rainy road. She was still trying to control the narrative, still trying to make herself the victim. But there was no sympathy left in me, no anger either, just cold, measured silence. She reached for my hand. I pulled away. She flinched like I had struck her, like she was only just realizing how deep the consequences ran. Please, she whispered, voice cracking, please, can we just talk alone, not here, not like this. Her eyes darted to the crowd around us, watching, judging. She wanted to escape the weight of their stares, but I wasn't about to give her that mercy. Not like this, I repeated, as if the irony was lost on her. You mean not with an audience, not with people who see you for what you really are? Her face crumpled, tears welling up. She was losing control, and she knew it. No one was stepping in to comfort her. No one was coming to her rescue, not her friends, not her family, not her colleagues, who were now exchanging quiet glances, undoubtedly recalculating their opinions of her. Her perfect world was slipping through her fingers, and all she could do was watch. I straightened, adjusted my cuff, took a slow sip of my drink, letting her feel the weight of every second stretching between us. I don't think there's anything left to talk about, I said, finally, my voice even measured, controlled. I've already taken care of everything. Her breath hitched. What do you mean? Her voice barely above a whisper. I let a small smile touch my lips, but there was nothing warm in it. You'll find out soon enough. And with that, I set my glass down, gave a polite nod to the room, and walked away, leaving her there drowning in her own destruction. After that night, everything fell apart for her, piece by piece, like a house built on rotting foundations, finally collapsing under its own weight. She tried at first to salvage what she could, to deny, to spin a different version of events, but the beauty of truth is that once it's out there, it doesn't need defending. It spreads on its own. It multiplies through whispers, through messages, through the uncomfortable silence of people who once called you a friend, but now look at you like a stranger. Her job was the first to go. I had made sure of that the moment I sent the anonymous email to HR with the evidence of her misusing company funds for her little escapades. Her employer had a strict policy on ethics and workplace relationships, especially ones that involved high-end hotel bills and expensive dinners charged to corporate accounts. When they called her, and she must have known what was coming, because by then the rumors had already started spreading. No one looked at her the same way. The respect she had once commanded reduced to nothing but hushed conversations behind closed doors. They let her resign to save face, but it didn't matter, because by then no one in Her industry would touch her. She wasn't just unemployed, she was unemployable. Then came the fallout with her family. Her parents had been at that dinner, had witnessed everything firsthand, and despite their attempts to mask their shame, the truth was undeniable. They were conservative, proud, had always prided themselves on the illusion of the perfect family, but now their daughter was a public disgrace, and they couldn't bear to be associated with it. They stopped answering her calls, stopped inviting her to family gatherings. She was alone, even in the eyes of the people who once swore they would always stand by her. Her friends, or what remained of them, had no loyalty left either. The ones who weren't outright disgusted by her betrayal were too busy protecting their own reputations. Some cut ties, immediately distancing themselves before the stain of her choices could touch them. Others lingered just long enough to extract the gossip from her before quietly slipping away. She was no longer the woman they admired, no longer the successful, powerful figure she had once pretended to be. Now she was just another cautionary tale, another name spoken in hushed tones, followed by a shake of the head and a whispered, "What a shame." And then, of course, there was her lover, or what remained of him. His wife took everything in the divorce, everything he had built, every account, every asset frozen and divided. He lost his job too, not because of the affair, but because men like him don't survive scandal. The people who once envied him now saw him for what he truly was: pathetic, desperate, ruined. I heard from mutual acquaintances that he left the city soon after. Too much shame, too many burned bridges, no money, no influence, no power, just another man who thought he was untouchable and learned the hard way that no one is. As for her, she tried to reach out at first, tried to text, to call, to leave messages filled with regret and empty apologies. At first they were desperate pleas. She wanted to talk, to explain, as if there was anything left to say. Then, when she got no response, they turned bitter. She accused me of ruining her life, as if I was the one who had made her choices for her, as if I had forced her into hotel rooms with another man. I never responded, not once, because she wasn't worth a response, because the best revenge is silence, because nothing I could have said would have hurt her more than watching her life collapse while I moved forward, untouched, unaffected, stronger than ever. And that's exactly what I did. I moved forward, I thrived, I replaced her in every way that mattered with a woman who knew the value of loyalty, who understood that love isn't just words, but actions. I rebuilt what she had tried to break, and I made it better than before, while she was left picking up the pieces of a life she had thrown away for nothing. She lost everything, and I lost nothing except for the weight of a lie I no longer had to carry. I sometimes wonder if she ever sits alone in the ruins of her own choices and asks herself if it was worth it, if the thrill of sneaking around, if the late-night whispers, if the stolen moments with a man who never planned to keep her were worth losing everything she had built. Because in the end, that's what happened. She lost, and I walked away untouched, stronger, sharper, better. I didn't have to destroy her. I simply let the truth do the work, because the truth has a way of cutting deeper than any act of revenge ever could. She tried to rebuild in the aftermath, but the thing about trust, once it's gone, it never truly comes back. People might forgive, but they never forget. She tried to move on, but the weight of her choices followed her everywhere. She couldn't escape the whispers, the stares, the job rejections, the former friends who avoided her calls, the family who couldn't bear to look at her without seeing the shame she had brought upon them. She tried dating again, but it turns out men don't line up to commit to a woman whose biggest story is how she threw away a loyal husband for a cheap affair. She reached out once more just recently, a message in the middle of the night, simple but loaded with everything she wanted to say. "Do you ever think about us?" I stared at the message for a long time, longer than I should have, but not because I was tempted. No, that door had closed forever. I stared at it because I was trying to decide if I should answer, if I should let her know exactly what I thought about her, question if I should tell her that there was no us, that there hadn't been for a long time, not since the first line, not since the first time she chose someone else over me. But in the end, I deleted the message unread, because some things don't deserve a response. Some things are best left in the past with the people who destroyed them. Because that's the thing about betrayal. The person who cheats thinks they're the one in control. They think they're making the choices, but what they don't realize is that they are handing the power to the one they betrayed. And when that person decides to strike back, when they decide to take everything away, there is no escape. She learned that too late, and by the time she realized it, she was already drowning in the consequences. So I'll leave you with this. What would you have done in my place? Would you have forgiven her? Would you have confronted her? Would you have walked away? Or would you have made sure she felt every ounce of the pain she thought she could escape? Because in the end, there's only one truth. People don't regret the affair, they regret getting caught.